In the darkness of the 41st millennium, when countless cries for aid echoed across the Imperium and went unanswered, a silent edict was passed from the high towers of Terra. In the shadowed halls of the Adeptus Terra, behind vaulted doors and beneath the gaze of dead saints carved into cold stone, the decision was made to birth warriors not of prestige, but of necessity. The Bastion founding, they would call it later. But there were no triumphal parades, no banners raised, only war waiting. The Emperor's spears were born not into glory, but into isolation. They were forged for a region the Imperium had all but abandoned, Alara's Vale, a cursed stretch of void on the fringes of Segmentum Ultima, where stars died screaming and whole systems vanished without report. Imperial cartographers would scratch their heads and redraw borders, whispering of storms that swallowed whole fleets and of echoes that danced in the warp where no beacon should be. It was there the Adeptus Astartes were dispatched, not in the shining force of an indomitous crusade, but as a whisper sent into a hurricane. From this whisper came the spears. It is said the chapter was created from the blood of Guilliman, the noble gene line of the Ultramarines. Yet there are many among the chapter's librarius who question this. Their demeanor is not that of Macragge. They do not march in perfect formations or quote the Codex Astartes like scripture. They are primal, elemental, violent when roused. If they carry Guilliman's blood, it has been weathered and reshaped by the storms of a harsher life. But the truth of their gene seed was never confirmed, deliberately obscured, or perhaps deliberately ignored. They emerged in recorded history around the mid-4940, specifically 594 M40, answering a distress call from a Mechanicus hydroponic station orbiting a dead world near the Halo stars. There, the Emperor's spears struck with a ferocity that shocked even the hardened survivors. No fanfare, no declarations. They arrived in orbit in sleek, weather-scoured frigates and descended in silence. Bolters roared, xenos blood sprayed the walls, and within an hour the station was cleared. The survivors expected to be debriefed, questioned, processed. The spears offered none of that. They took their trophies, then they left. There is no recorded chapter master at that time, no official heraldry, no fleet registries. What few fragments exist suggest that the chapter, in its earliest form, did not adhere to the usual structures of the Adeptus Astartes. Instead of companies, they had war hosts. Instead of captains, they had kings. They wore deep cobalt armor, marked not with laurel or eagle, but with crude spearheads carved into ceramite. Their warships bore hull scars and tribal etchings. No ship was new. Every hull had fought before, or had been stolen from an earlier grave. This was a chapter raised for one purpose, to die where others had failed. The High Lord sent the spears to Alara's Vale with two other chapters, the Celestial Lions and the Star Scorpions. Together they were named the Vylari, 3 shields to bar the door of a region thick with heresy, xenos incursions, and the creeping tendrils of the warp. But it was not an equal pact. The Celestial Lions held pride. The Star Scorpions bore secrets. The spears were different. They did not seek to lead. They sought to hold. The oaths they swore were not to Terra, nor even to Guilliman's return, but to the people of the Vale, to guard them, even if forgotten. The founding of the chapter itself was likely orchestrated under the auspices of the Adeptus Mechanicus, with Bellona, a forge moon orbiting the spear's future homeworld, serving as logistical arm. Bellona provided armor, gene labs, and what little resource the spears needed to survive. But Bellona did not control them. The spears would bow to no forge world, no distant council. They were answerable only to their own. Already they had begun to break from the Codex Astartes, forming their own rites, their own methods. Already they knew isolation. In those early years, the chapter operated like a ghost. Records are few. Battles are mentioned only in passing in Mechanicus logs or recovered astropathic fragments. Worlds where the sky burned red, where primitive human cultures worshipped blue-armored giants who came like angels of death. Even within the Administratum, debates flared. Some argued the chapter should be recalled for discipline. Others asked, how do you recall what cannot be reached? Warp storms churned around the Veil. Even sending a fleet to investigate meant risking dozens of lives, and so the High Lords left them be. Better an unorthodox chapter than no chapter at all. What is known, what endures beyond rumor, is this. The Emperor's spears were effective, savage but effective. They won victories that no one witnessed, held systems that would have collapsed without them. And they did so not because of oversight, but because of certainty. Each battle, each engagement was chosen not for strategy or honor, but for meaning. The spears do not fight out of obedience. They fight because they believe it is what fate demands. Many early scribes described them as nihilists, warriors who believe the Imperium is doomed, yet who fight on anyway, not to save it, but to deserve it. To make its fall something that meant something. They speak of death as a certainty, but of purpose as a choice. This, above all, is what makes them different. They do not dream of victory. They dream of endurance, of surviving until the last breath, so that when the galaxy burns, they may face the fire unbowed. In 599 M40, a rogue inquisitor named Varnus encountered them during the purge of Corazon Prime. He later wrote, "They came from the void like beasts given voice. Their armor bore blood, their eyes carried storms. They ignored my authority, my rosette, my command, and yet I could not stop them. For I knew in my bones that these were not soldiers, these were fate's chosen. The Emperor's spears were born of no grand design, no monument honors their creation, no hymns sing of their early victories. But in the far reaches of Alara's Veil, where the stars bleed and silence kills, their name is remembered, in whispered prayers, in tribal chants, in runes carved into stone and bone, not because they were the Emperor's finest, but because they came when no one else did, and they stayed. There is a world adrift in the veil of crimson gas and ruined stars, where the oceans never sleep and the sky is always weeping. This is Nemeton, the heart of the Emperor's spears, their home, their forge, their tomb. No imperial envoy who sets foot here leaves unchanged. No parchment record or pict capture has ever truly conveyed its fury. It is a world that does not welcome life. It tests it, and only the unbroken remain. Nemeton is classified as a death world, yet even that designation feels inadequate. Most death worlds kill the unprepared. Nemeton kills the prepared too. It is a sphere almost entirely covered in vast, churning oceans, with only the spines of jagged island chains rising like broken teeth from its green-gray depths. These are not tranquil waters, nor are they forgiving. Its waves crest in walls hundreds of feet high, driven by perpetual superstorms that crack the sky with emerald lightning. Currents rip steel ships in half. Its depths hide predators larger than void ships. To stand on Nemeton's shores is to be under siege, not from armies, but from the world itself. The Emperor's spears were not given this world. They claimed it. When the chapter arrived, the tribes of Nemeton already existed, feral humans who had survived for thousands of years, untouched by the Astronomicon, forgotten by all but myth. They had no cities, no language shared beyond the boundaries of their islands. Their lives were governed by blood and salt, by offerings to nameless storm spirits, and by the right of the spear. A brutal coming-of-age trial involving solitary voyages across the ocean with only a weapon and a charm carved from driftwood. These people did not call themselves Nemetesi. They had no word for their world. They simply were. But the Astartes recognized something within them, not just strength, not just endurance, but a raw and feral clarity. These tribes, these island dwellers, understood suffering. They did not cry out when loss came. They endured it, as one endures the wind and the rain. The spears saw their own spirit reflected in the eyes of these people and declared that this world would be their crucible. Rather than build some lofty mountain fortress or sub-oceanic fortress vault, as many chapters might have done, the Emperor's spears embraced the storm. They constructed their fortress monastery upon a massive drifting hull, a continent-sized ship made from the wrecks of voidcraft scavenged from the Veil's dead fleets. This Leviathan is called the Gilded Blade. Though there is nothing gold about it, its hull is black, barnacle-covered, and reinforced with adamantine stripped from ancient imperial hulks. It moves with the ocean currents, powered by a submerged engine corpus that groans with Mechanicus hymns, and every storm that tries to sink it only deepens its scars. Around the Gilded Blade, other smaller mobile citadels drift, connected by massive chains and bridges. These lesser bastions hold the chapter's forges, librarium archives, apothecarion, and gene vaults. Together they form a floating archipelago of fury, bound in steel and storm. The waves batter them daily, the winds tear at their walls, yet they hold, always they hold. The aspirants of the chapter, taken from the 12 tribes, must first survive a trial unlike any in the Codex Astartes. They are not marched in lines or tested with rites of logic. They are placed aboard coracles carved from living trees, armed with bone-bladed spears, and set adrift on the ocean. Alone. No supplies, no guidance, only the storm and what fate decrees. They call it the drift, and not all return. Some are taken by beasts, kraken, wave serpents, glimmer sharks. Some are broken by the hunger and hurl themselves into the sea. Some vanish entirely, as if the world itself had swallowed them. But those who return are not boys. They are no longer even entirely human. They come back half-starved, covered in salt rashes and self-inflicted wounds, eyes burning with something primal. Then, and only then, are they taken by the spears. From there, they are broken further. Initiates are trained not just in war, but in silence. The chapter values silence not as a void, but as a weapon. They believe words are spent like blood, to be used sparingly, only when needed. A veteran of the spears might go days, even weeks, without speaking, even among his kin. They communicate with glances, with gestures, with the slow rhythm of drumming fingers on armor. This is not superstition, it is survival. Nemeton does not favor the loud. Above Nemeton, the sky is not black, it is green. The storms churn so high that the atmosphere itself reflects the light of the Veil's cursed nebulae. The warp spills into the sky, dyeing the clouds in colors not found in any Terran palette. At night, one can see strange lights moving between stars, too slow for satellites, too fast for ships. The people call these lights the Eyes. They believe the Emperor watches through them, and when one passes overhead, it is custom to fall to one knee and speak a wordless vow into the sea. Even the chapter obeys this. But Nemeton is not only storm and sky. Beneath its waves lie ruins. The librarians do not speak of them often, but some records remain. Ancient stonework, towers swallowed by the tide, machines that hum with energy, even submerged for millennia. There are hints that before the Imperium, before even the Age of Strife, something lived here. Perhaps human, perhaps not. The spears have retrieved relics from these depths, but they do not study them. They bury them in vaults sealed with warp sigils and forget them. Whatever secrets lie beneath the sea, the chapter has decided it is better not to know. And then there is the Forge Moon, Bellona, a jagged orb in high orbit, owned by the Adeptus Mechanicus but dependent on Nemeton for protection. It is here that the spear's armor is reforged, their gene seed nurtured, and their few vessels maintained. Yet the relationship is strained. The tech priests distrust the spear's tribal rituals, their disregard for strict protocol. The spears, in turn, consider the tech priests too slow, too bound by logic to understand the truth of survival. Still, they need each other, and so they endure one another. What is perhaps most striking about Nemeton is what it does to time. Days blur into nights, storms last for weeks. Warriors sent on patrol can vanish for a year and return changed, older, wiser, marked with ritual scars and bones carved with ogham. It is said the planet lives, that it knows who walks its shores and judges their worth, that it speaks if one listens closely enough, not in words but in tremors, in the rhythm of tides. The spears listen. They claim to know the soul of their world. They speak to it before battle. They promise it blood. They return the ashes of their dead to the waves, not in ceremony but in silence. The sea takes them back, and in doing so makes them part of the world once more. Not lost, not gone, just returned. This is Nemeton. It does not give, it does not bless, it endures. And those who call it home must endure as well. Before a warrior of the Emperor's spears ever dons ceramite or swears a vow upon the blade, he is first a child of the 12. This is not a chapter that selects its aspirants from a schola or takes tithes of the strongest. No, the spears are older in spirit than the Imperium itself, and their trials begin not with combat, but with prophecy, carved not into scrolls, but into blood. Across the archipelagos of Nemeton dwell 12 distinct tribal clans, each spread across a web of islands only barely rising above the tide. Each tribe is its own world, with its own customs, its own banners woven from storm flesh and reef wool. But all 12 share one rite, the reading of the Geas. The Geas is not merely a superstition, it is an event, a reckoning. Within the first week of a child's life, he or she is brought to the Druid. Every tribe has at least one, an old soul, marked by strange eyes and stranger speech, one who speaks with the storm and claims to dream in ogham. These Druids are psychers, though they would never use that word. They claim no knowledge of the warp or the Scholastica Sicana. Their power is older, rawer, untamed, and dangerous. The rite begins with silence, always silence. The druid takes the infant and draws a blade of bone across the child's palm or foot. The blood is spilled onto a blackened stone, ancient and worn, passed down since before Imperial memory. The blood mixes with the salt of the sea, with the moss that never dies, and the druid begins to chant. It is not a language the Mechanicus can translate. Not even the chapter's own librarians have deciphered the dialect. It is older than High Gothic. Some say it predates Old Earth. Others whisper it is not a language at all, but an invocation, a way to hear what already is. From this rite, the druid gives the Geas. It may be a single word, a symbol, a carved mark etched into a piece of bone and hung around the child's neck. But it is law. It is fate. That Geas will follow them for the rest of their life, whether they become fishers or outcasts, warriors or martyrs. No Geas is questioned, no Geas is ignored. Those whose Geas bears a spear, a jagged lightning-like shape in the ogham, are marked by the chapter. They are the fated. Not all who carry the spear-shaped geas will become Space Marines, but all Space Marines of the Emperor's spears were once children so marked. It is said the geas reveals the Emperor's will, filtered through the Veil's storms. The Druids are his mouth, and the blood is his ink. When the time comes, around adolescence, the spears arrive. There is no ceremony, no heraldry. A gunmetal-hued skimmer descends from the clouds. Armor-clad giants emerge in silence. They present no scroll, no demand, no explanation. They look the chieftain in the eye, and if the chieftain is wise, he nods. The child is handed over. If the tribe resists, the spears do not fight. They do not argue. They simply turn and leave. The child's yeas will remain unfulfilled, and the tribe will be marked as cowards. No one wants that. To be chosen by the spears is both blessing and death sentence. The tribes know this. The parents weep, the siblings howl, but they do not interfere. It is a sacred wound, one that never fully heals, because once a child is taken, they do not return. Even if they die in training, even if they fail the trials, their bones are cast to the sea by the chapter. Their memory becomes part of the ocean's song. Each tribe reveres the Gias differently. The tribe of Morak believes the Gias is not fate, but debt, that a child marked by it owes the Emperor a life. They raise their children in silence, in constant training, preparing them to pay that debt in full. Others, like the Cern of the Eastern Reef, believe the Gies to be a gift from the dead, a whisper from ancestors who walk in dreams. Their druids often sleep for days before a Gias reading, fasting and inhaling hallucinogenic salts. No tribe interprets the mark the same way, yet all obey it. There are tales, of course, of false Gies, of marks faked by desperate parents who wish their child to be chosen, of druids who whisper their own ambitions into the blood. These are dangerous games. The spears know the difference. When they arrive to claim a child, they bring with them a small relic, a totem of bone and black metal engraved with machine-etched ogham. They hold it to the child's chest. If the Gies is true, the relic grows warm. If false, it remains cold. There is no punishment, no death. But the rejection scars deeply. The child is left behind, and their tribe is never visited again. The Emperor's spears do not speak of these relics. They do not reveal how they work. Some believe they are psi-reactive. Others think they are ancient Archaeotech remnants from before the chapter's arrival. The truth is buried, perhaps even to the spears themselves, but they trust the relics, as they trust the Gies. Even once a child is taken, the Gies does not end. Throughout their training, their rise into Astartes, their Gies remains with them, not physically, but spiritually. Many tattoo their mark into their skin once they pass the trial of drift. Others etch it into their armor. Some speak to it in prayer before battle. They do not pray to the Emperor as Terra understands him. They pray to the storm, the sea, the blood, and the Gies, which binds them to a fate they did not choose. There are warriors among the spears whose Gies foretold doom, who were told they would fall in battle, their names forgotten, their deeds buried. They do not resist this. They welcome it. To them, the worst fate is not to die. It is to fail the death that was promised. This fatalism is not nihilism. It is purpose. The spears are not fatalists because they believe nothing matters, but because they believe everything does. The Gies is not a prophecy to be feared, but a map, a path, even if it ends in fire. And then there are the rarest Gies of all, the twin mark. A child born with two Gies carved into their fate, one of spear, one of flame. These children are taken immediately, raised not among the other aspirants, but in isolation. No one outside the chapter knows what becomes of them. Some believe they are trained as librarians, others whisper of deeper secrets. Perhaps they become watchers. Perhaps something darker. Only the spears know. Among the 12 tribes, there is an unspoken understanding, a quiet reverence. They do not speak the name of the Emperor. They do not build shrines to him, but they send their best into the sea, into the storm, into silence. And when the storm breaks and blue-armored giants descend from the sky to claim another soul, they do not run. They do not hide. They kneel, because to be marked by the Geas is not to be chosen. It is to be claimed. High above the drowned horizon of Nemeton drift the moons, cold, distant, and merciless. They do not glimmer with warmth or promise. They do not reflect the sun's light in silvery elegance. These moons are the eyes of the Emperor's spears, the ever-watching sentinels in the void. Where Nemeton is alive with storm and spirit, its moons are quiet. But their silence is not peace, it is vigilance. And from them the chapter draws its weapons, its omens, and, some whisper, its damnation. There are 3 that matter, 3 moons that hold dominion over the spear's heavens. Their names are Bellona, Canta, and Osseous. Bellona, first among them, is no moon of nature. It is a forge moon, gifted, or more accurately, installed, by the Adeptus Mechanicus upon the chapter's founding. Wrapped in iron and flame, Bellona is an orbiting bastion of industry. Its surface is a labyrinth of hissing vents, rune-etched reactors, and clanging foundries. Here, the weapons of the Emperor's spears are forged, bolters shaped with ritual efficiency, blades tempered in sacred oils drawn from Martian scripts, gunships painstakingly pieced together from scavenged relics and local mineral ores. Bellona does not sing, it roars. The spears have no love for it. It is not hatred, but discomfort. The warriors of Nemeton, who read fate in blood and listen to the wind before striking, do not understand the cold logic of the Mechanicus. And the tech priests, in turn, do not understand the chapter they serve. The Omnissiah's servants view the spears as tribal anomalies. They flinch at their crude rituals and recoil from their silent contempt for binary prayer. The spears do not kneel before the cog. They bow only to the Emperor, and even then, rarely. Yet, the 2 have remained bound. Necessity is stronger than ideology. Bellona produces, the spears protect. And in that brutal agreement, a strange cooperation has emerged. Tech adepts, drawn from Bellona's own ranks, often find themselves seconded to the chapter, not by choice, but by decree. These red-robed emissaries walk the halls of the Gilded Blade in constant unease, surrounded by chanting warriors daubed in sea salt and ochre, speaking in Ogham and moving like predators. But in time, some adapt. A few even thrive. The most famous of these was Magos Vireta Tal, a forge witch, as the spears called her. She served the chapter for nearly 2 centuries, forging blades that seemed to hum with stormlight. She wore her cogitators like sacred bones and spoke both binary and Ogham, and she died in silence, her body cast into the sea like a brother. Some say Bellona mourned her. Others claim the tech priests attempted to recall her body for interment. The spears refused. She was theirs. But Bellona is not the only moon that holds sway over the chapter. There is Canta. Canta is not a forge moon. It is a secret, a rock cloaked in shadow, its surface veiled by swirling electromagnetic storms that blind auspex and occlude even psychic scans. It is uninhabited, officially. There are no known installations, no imperial codes, but the tribes of Nemeton speak of Canta with a reverence greater than they give the Emperor himself. They say Canta whispers. They say there is an oracle there, older than the spears, older than the Imperium, who sees through the mists of time and speaks not in prophecy, but in truth, a voice that only the chosen can hear. No one claims to have met her, But the legends persist. In the dead of night, some warriors claim to dream of a pale woman with skin like moonstone, eyes like black oceans, and a voice like thunder beneath the sea. She speaks in Ogam. She speaks in silence. And when the spears act, when they change course mid-battle, when they choose to defend a backwater world with no value, when they execute an inquisitorial envoy without explanation, they always claim the same thing. Kanta spoke. The librarians of the chapter do not debate this. They do not analyze it. When asked, they respond with a single gesture, 2 fingers to the brow, then to the sky. It is the sign of Kanta. Whether she is a psyker hidden in a vault, a living fragment of a long-dead AI, or something far older, the truth remains concealed. The Oracle has no voice outside the chapter, but within it, her word is gospel. Even Bellona dares not set foot upon Kanta. No tech priest has landed there and returned. The last moon is lesser known, barely mentioned in records, often confused for a dead asteroid. Osseous. Osseous is a graveyard. It is not natural. It was shaped, carved into the shape of a shattered skull, its surface pocked with craters that glow faintly red. No one lives there. No structures rise from its surface, but the Emperor's spears send their dead there. Not all, most return to the ocean, as is the custom. But some, the honored, the fallen, the cursed, their sarcophagi are launched from orbit in solemn silence, crashing into the dust of Osseous like meteors. The surface of the moon is now littered with the armored dead. Rows upon rows of broken helms, shattered blades, and nameless tombs. No names are carved, no tributes paid. They are not remembered with words, because the spears believe that remembrance is not for the living. Only the Emperor remembers, and that is enough. Every 10 years, the chapter dispatches a solitary warrior to walk the surface of Osseous. He spends a day and a night there. No one speaks to him upon his return. He does not report. He is not questioned. But those who walk Osseous change. They become quieter, sharper, sometimes crueler, but always more certain. It is said the dead speak there, that their silence teaches truths the living cannot endure. The 3 moons, the hammer of Bellona, the whisper of Kanta, the memory of Osseous, form the sacred trinity of the chapter's cosmology. They are not worshipped, but they are feared. The spears speak of them not as places, but as presences. Bellona is strength, Kanta is fate, Osseous is judgment. When a warrior stands before the armorers for his first suit of power armor, he looks to the sky. If Bellona is full, it is considered a sign of wrath. If Kanta is visible through the cloud breaks, it is a sign of wisdom. If Osseous casts a shadow, it is a sign that he will die soon. The moons are not doctrine. There is no writ about them in the Codex Astartes. But for the spears, they are truths greater than any tome. They shape the chapter's wars, their decisions, their silences. They do not cry out in battle. They do not sing in victory. They look to the heavens. And the moons look back. Before the darkness widened, before the veil split in agony and the stars bled warp light, there was a pact. Not one of pride or conquest, not an alliance forged by shared dreams of glory, but a covenant of necessity, of desperation, and of grim, silent hope. They called it the Pact of the Vailari. It was a binding of blood between 3 chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, forged in the high, cold corridors of the Segmentum Ultima command echelons. And it was born from a single, unflinching truth. The Imperium could not hold Ilara's veil alone. The veil, that cursed spiral arm of space, shrouded in crimson gas clouds and impossible warp currents, had long resisted Imperial control. Its human worlds, distant and culturally fractured, had become nests of heresy and mutation. Rogue psychers rose like weeds in the dust. Xenos parasites burrowed into hive spires, communications were sporadic at best, and Terra, wrapped in its own endless spiral of bureaucracy and detachment, declared the sector strategically irrelevant. But that changed with a single scream. It was not a voice that sparked the Vaelari Pact, but a signal, a pulse. A vox burst from a lost forge world named Hiraeth, garbled and panicked, repeating a single phrase in corrupted High Gothic. They walk behind the veil. They are pure. They remember. The message repeated for 73 seconds before silence consumed it. Hiraeth was gone. No astropathic contact, no return message. A Mechanicus exploratory fleet sent to investigate never returned. And when the second fleet arrived 3 years later, all it found was wreckage, burned-out hulls spinning in orbit, their metal blackened with sigils that did not belong to any known power. It was enough. The High Lords, or perhaps those just beneath them, Lords Militant and Masters of Segmentum, declared the Veil a Red Sector priority. But they would not dispatch the might of the Astra Militarum, nor did the Adeptus Custodes move. Instead, the burden was passed to the Astartes. 3 chapters would be sent, one from glory, one from mystery, and one from silence. The Celestial Lions were the first, descendants of Rogel Dorn, proud and radiant, forged in the blood of Armageddon and tempered in endless war. They bore golden armor, leonine helms, and a deep-seated hatred of cowardice. To many in the Imperium, they were a symbol of righteous fury, the Emperor's wrath, clad in roaring defiance. The Star Scorpions were next, a chapter surrounded in whispers. Their history was half-formed, their gene seed source unknown. Some even speculated they were not from any known founding, but a clandestine creation buried beneath the Ordo's shadow. Their tactics were precise, surgical, their demeanor cold, but their record was flawless. And then came the Emperor's spears. They arrived without ceremony, no formal presentation, no oath before the ecclesiarchy's altars. Just a single warship breaching the orbit of Virex Prime, where the summit was held, and a dozen blue-armored warriors descending without announcement. They entered the Grand Strategium, still clad in their salt-scoured power armor, and knelt before no one. When asked why they had come, their leader, a grizzled warrior known only as Break, spoke 5 words. "The Veil calls. We answer." From that moment, the pact was sealed. The Vaelari were bound by oaths not recorded in parchment, but spoken over fire and blade. Their purpose was singular: to defend Elera's Veil from annihilation in all its forms, xenos, mutant, demon, or traitor. Each chapter would claim authority over a sphere of the Veil, acting autonomously but with shared purpose. And when the call was made, the Vaelari cry, all would come to war as one. At first, it worked. The Celestial Lions brought order to the core worlds, driving out cults and reinforcing garrisons. The Star Scorpions established a network of hidden watch stations along the outer reaches, placing listening posts and strike caches where they might one day halt a greater tide. And the Emperor's spears, they vanished into the storms. Where the others patrolled sectors, the spears embedded themselves. They walked the blighted moons, the tomb planets, the acid-washed mining colonies where even the Astra Militarum dared not tread. They built no fortresses, they left no statues, they simply fought. And where they passed, heresies burned, but unity is fragile in the Imperium, even among Astartes. The Lions, proud as they were, began to question the silence of their brothers. Why did the spears never report in full? Why did they ignore formal orders from Segmentum Command? Why did the Scorpions demand encryption protocols that no other chapter used and refuse to share their genetic records? Tension rose. It came to a head during the culling of Velos, when all 3 chapters were called to purge a world overrun with demonic infestations, believed to originate from a tainted Mechanicus transmission tower. The Lions launched their assault first, banners raised high. The Spears, already on world, ignored all Vox contact and struck the tower directly. And the Scorpions never arrived. Instead, their ships watched from orbit, making no move to assist or intervene. In the aftermath, the Spears claimed the threat had been neutralized. The Lions accused them of recklessness. The Scorpions vanished back into the void. The Veil, as ever, offered no answers. Then came the collapse. It began subtly. Vox signals from the outer ring of the Veil grew erratic. Minor watch stations failed to check in. A trading convoy vanished near the red halo. The Spears, stretched thin, attempted to track the disappearances and discovered signs of something familiar. Fragments of power armor marked with Scorpion insignias, sigils twisted into mockeries of the Imperial Aquila. A strange new creed written in Ogum and Hex runes. We are the pure, we remember. The Star Scorpions had fallen. No declaration, no final stand, no last message. They simply disappeared. And what rose in their place were not brothers. They were something else, something worse. The Pure, as they called themselves, began launching calculated strikes against Mechanicus outposts and astropathic choirs. They moved like ghosts. They killed like gods. The Celestial Lions rallied their strength. The Spears fought where they could. But the Pact, the Vailari, was broken. Not by war, but by silence. Some claimed the Lions would soon turn on the Spears, blaming them for their inaction, for the secrecy that had defined their role. Others believed that the Inquisition itself, alarmed by the growing instability of the Veil, had begun moving assets into place. Watch forts burned, old alliances frayed, and then finally the Imperium forgot. Terra's gaze moved elsewhere. The Cicatrix Maledictum opened. The galaxy fractured. The Velare Pact, once forged in desperation and kept alive by mutual purpose, faded into memory. Only the Spears remained in the Veil. The Lions withdrawn, diminished by hidden betrayals. The Scorpions, now monsters. What became of the Pact? The chapter does not speak of it, not openly. But deep in the Librarius, aboard the Gilded Blade, a stone tablet remains, carved in Ogum, weathered by salt. It bears no chapter symbols, no names, only 3 marks: a lion, a scorpion, a spear. Beneath them, one line: one shall endure. The Emperor's spears never sought glory in the Pact. They never raised their voice in council halls or demanded recognition. They answered the call because no one else would. And when the Pact died and the stars fell and the Veil turned to ash, they remained, not out of duty, but because they were the last, before the rift tore open the sky and drowned half the galaxy in screaming warp light, before the Astronomicon flickered like a dying ember. There was a world named Hyreth. Once it had been the heart of the Southern Veil, a forge world minor by Mechanicus standards, but vital to the frontier. It did not command glory like Mars, nor produce god engines like Lucius, but it endured. Its factories poured forth augmetics, hull plating, and cogitator cores to keep the border forts alive. Its tech priests were loyal. Its forge cities blazed day and night with labor, and its void yards birthed warships from the metal of dead moons. Now it is a tomb. The Emperor's spears do not speak of Hyreth often, but when they do so with the reverence a brother gives the corpse of kin. Not sorrow, not nostalgia, just silence and memory and unspoken fury. The beginning of Hyreth's end came not with invasion, but with silence. The chapter's first warnings were subtle. Supply shipments failed to arrive. Requests for repairs went unanswered. Vox traffic grew distorted, static, heavy with ghost tones. At first, it was attributed to the solar storms that often ravaged the sector. But then the final transmission arrived. A single corrupted data pulse, no longer than 15 seconds, broadcast across the veil like a dying scream. No words, just a sequence of images, raw, flickering, half erased by warp interference. A forged city aflame, Skitarii impaled upon their own bayonets, the Martian cog symbol, inverted and burning. And beneath it, scrawled in blood and oil, "They are here. They were always here. We were never alone." Then, nothing. The Imperium made no reply. The Ordos claimed corruption. Segmentum Command issued no reinforcement orders. Not even Bologna responded. And so, as always, the Spears acted alone. A strike frigate, light in the shallows, was dispatched under the command of Brother Captain Darnak of the 5th War Host. He took with him 30 warriors, veterans of campaigns across the Veil, silent killers seasoned by 100 stormfronts. They carried no fanfare, no glory, only vengeance and steel. The last Vox report from Darnak came 87 hours after planetfall. The Forge bleeds. They are inside the machine. We are too late. The Skitarii turned on us. Skin cracked open, faces gone. Not corrupted, not possessed. Changed. A logic beyond logic. We go deeper. We must find the core. The core remembers. After that, only silence. The Spears did not recall another ship. They sent 3. 3 full warships descended on High-Wraith's corpse. They expected resistance. They expected the pure. They expected corruption, demons, heretics, mechanicus, heretics. What they found was worse. The Forge world was not destroyed. It was empty. Its surface, once glowing with molten rivers and industrial fire, had gone cold. The void yards drifted aimlessly, half-constructed hulls spinning like derelicts. City ruins stood untouched, rusted, but not collapsed. There were no signs of battle, no orbital scarring, no bodies. But the silence was not natural. Scout patrols found the remains of servitors fused into walls, tech priests with expressions of serene ecstasy frozen in death. Wires fed through their eye sockets, their veins pulsing with oil long after the flesh had rotted. Skitarii corpses without skulls, voxcasters chirping with words no one had spoken. Every machine still functioned, but not under human control. The ship's engine's ears began to report anomalies, interfaces speaking in ancient dialects, machine spirits refusing to obey, weapon systems that would not unlock no matter how many rites were recited. And at the heart of it all, in the forged Templum Sanctis Omega, a light. Not fire, not plasma, but something alive. The Spears did not understand it. They did not try. They did what they always did. They purged. Over 200 Astartes deployed across Hiraeth, moving through the silent manufactoria like ghosts, their boots echoing on steel walkways untouched by man. They cleansed every servitor, every corrupted cogitator. They tore through data cores. They destroyed reactor banks. They fought no enemies, but the world fought them. Doors closed without command. Elevators plummeted into chasms. Servo arms struck from ceilings. The machine itself turned on them, not as a tool wielded by heretics, but as if it had become something else, something aware. In the darkest vaults beneath the central forge, they found what was left of Darnak's strike force. Their corpses were arranged in a perfect circle, armor removed, faces erased, not flayed, erased, smooth blank skulls where eyes and mouths should have been. Each one held a blade across their chest. Each blade had the same word engraved on its hilt in binary encoded Ogum: witness. They purged the vault with melta and flame. They burned the command spires. They brought down the orbital docks with macro cannon fire. And then, before leaving orbit, The gilded blade opened its main lance batteries and reduced Hiraeth's surface to slag. The spears do not abandon ground lightly, but some places are not meant to be reclaimed. When Bellona requested Hiraeth's destruction report, the chapter replied with one line: "It was never yours." In the centuries since, the true nature of Hiraeth's fall has become the center of much speculation, both within the chapter and beyond. The Inquisition has made no formal declaration of chaos taint. No demonic incursion was ever logged. The tech priests of Bellona mutter of machine singularities and discontinuities in motive-spirit cohesion, but offer no direct blame. The Spears, for their part, have accepted it, not because they understand it, but because they believe understanding is not always the point. Hiraeth was a lesson, a warning, that even loyalty is no shield, that even sacred machinery can dream of rebellion, and that sometimes silence is not emptiness, but presence. Since that day, the chapter has altered certain protocols. No longer do they allow automated systems to remain active in any base or fortress. All machine spirits are watched by a living hand. Servitors are ritually blinded before being installed. Tech prayers are spoken in Ogum, not binary as a ward. Librarians carry iron totems encoded with fragments of Horeth's last data bleed worn across the chest like shackles. They call it the burden of witness, a reminder that vigilance does not sleep, that the machine is not always friend, and that when the Forge worlds dream, they may not wake as allies. To the wider Imperium, Hiraeth is a footnote, a destroyed Forge world in a sector already half lost to warp storms and fading signals. But to the Spears, it is sacred ground, a battlefield of a war no one else even saw. They do not speak of it often, but when a recruit receives his first bolt gun, there is a tradition. He is led into a chamber where the walls are lined with slag iron from Hiraeth's ruins, melted into plaques. He is asked to touch one, feel the weight of silence, and remember that some enemies do not bleed, do not shout, do not scream. Some simply watch. And if you are not vigilant, you will not see them until it is too late. There is no warning in betrayal, no cry before the knife slides between the ribs. When brothers fall, it is not always to the roar of heresy or the shriek of demons. Sometimes it is to the silence of absence. One day they speak, the next they vanish. And what returns is not them. It wears their colors, it speaks in their tongue, but it is hollow. This is the fate of the Star Scorpions. They were once vaunted. Strange, yes, always strange, but lauded for their precision, their tactical brilliance, their efficiency. Of the three who bore the Pact of the Vailari, it was the Scorpions who mapped the Veil's outer reaches, who traced warp tides through the Crimson Halo, who seeded the void with hidden signal beacons and rapid response caches. They were secretive, yes, private to the point of paranoia, but effective. At first, their methods were merely peculiar. Where the Celestial Lions held court with banners high, and the Emperor's spears descended into mud and flame, the Scorpions worked from above. Precision orbital strikes, indirect warfare, psychological sabotage. They did not conquer planets, they unraveled them. Entire cults would vanish overnight, supply lines would collapse in cascading failure, leaders would wake with their second hearts crushed. Then the Scorpions would arrive, clean their blade, and vanish again. To some, they were angels, to others, phantoms. But the Spears saw something else, not in what the Scorpions said, but in what they did not. They never walked among the people, never touched the ground unless necessary. They treated human survivors like contagious vermin, quarantining settlements, burning entire regions when mutation ratios exceeded some obscure threshold. Even the chapter's own serfs were blindfolded before transport. Their librarians never attended the conclaves. Their chaplains wore masks not just in war, but even in council. When the Spears sent emissaries, the Scorpions returned data slates. When the Spears sent oaths, the Scorpions returned silence. Still, the Veil was dangerous. Idiosyncrasies were forgiven if they bought survival. But then, they vanished. Not all at once. First, Vox silence, then signal distortion. Then their beacon codes ceased to match Imperial standards. Then the Scorpions stopped answering distress calls. Their warships disappeared from the registries of Bellona. Their watch stations ceased communication. No bodies, no reports, just absence. At first, the Spears believed them lost, victims of a massive warp incursion or a catastrophic engagement deep beyond the cartographied zones. The Veil had claimed worlds before. It could claim warriors, too. They were mourned, quietly, no banners lowered. Just a single black spear etched into the wall of the gilded blade, the symbol of silence honored. But silence has a weight, a shape. And then the shape began to speak. The first sightings came from the fringe, drifting wrecks of Imperial ships, picked clean not by xenos, but with surgical, human precision. Emblems carved into hulls, binary messages etched into the black box casings of burned-out astropath stations. A single phrase repeated again and again in corrupted High Gothic. "We are the pure." The Spears did not react at first. There are many warbands in the dark. The warp births new madness with each passing moment. But then came the footage, a salvaged cogitator core, recovered from a destroyed monitoring station on Veil World 9. Static-drenched, but clear enough. A squad of power-armored warriors moving in perfect formation, their armor repainted a stark bone white with crimson glyphs. Their heraldry, a scorpion's tail, their movements, exact, methodical, trained like the Scorpions, moving like them, but not them. Their eyes glowed wrong, their step was wrong, and one more detail chilled the blood of every Spear who saw the footage. They walked without vox, without gesture, in utter silence, and yet moved as one, as if hearing voices that did not pass through flesh. The Star Scorpions were gone. The Pure had taken their place. The Ordo Hereticus did not act. The Inquisition's eyes had turned elsewhere. The Cicatrix Maledictum loomed. Dozens of other crises demanded their resources, but the Spears knew better. They had fought too long, too far from the light to wait for permission. They declared a private hunt. It was not a war. Wars require declarations. This was an excision, a cleansing of a rot that had once worn the face of kin. The Spears activated sleeper fleets, deployed deep patrols into the black regions of the Veil, into systems with no names, only coordinates and cursed reputations. Every planet where the Pure had walked was to be burned, every echo of the Scorpions purged. They called it the Nameless Campaign. Not for the enemy, but because the Spears refused to give the traitors names. The battles were terrible. The Pure fought like gods, not like traitor Astartes who had embraced chaos in madness, but like warriors who believed they had been freed. They used logic, but it was corrupted, a logic twisted beyond sanity. They avoided corruption not by resisting chaos, but by removing humanity. Their speech was filtered through machine-augmented catechisms. Their bodies were modified, surgically stripped of extraneous features. No faces, no symbols of faith, no remnants of origin. Just armored shells of obedience. And at the center of it all, a figure, clad in deep crimson and white, bearing no helm, only a blank porcelain mask. He spoke no words, but his presence struck like thunder. Spears who encountered him described feeling their memories drain, as if their thoughts were being read. He walked into the storms of Nemeton once, alone, and walked back out unscathed. They named him only one thing: Khazar. Whether he had once been a scorpion or something worse remains unknown. The final confrontation came at a void fortress deep in the Vale's heart, a place unmarked on Imperial charts, a forge station called Foros Null, long thought lost. The Pure had converted it into a temple of logic, a shrine to silence. No statues, no banners, just ranks of servitors repeating prayers in endless loops, repeating numbers and equations until their tongues bled. The spears struck hard, using gravity lances and mass reactive warheads to breach the station's flank. Boarding pods followed, filled with 3rd and 5th War Host veterans. The battle was fast, brutal. Pure detachments countered with inhuman precision, coordinating as if they were a single organism. But the spears, driven by righteous fury and ancestral silence, cut through them. When the station fell, there was no cheer, no declaration of victory, just a voided corridor, a final chamber, and a message scrawled into the walls in flayed ceramite. "You are not alone. You never were." Khazar's body was not found. The station was collapsed with gravitic warheads. The spears withdrew. They never declared the Scorpions destroyed. They never asked the Inquisition for confirmation. They simply added another mark to the wall of the Gilded Blade, another black spear, another silence honored. In time, the Imperium would forget the Scorpions, but the spears would not. They carry the weight of betrayal not in bitterness, but in resolve. For they know the truth of brotherhood, that loyalty is not a given, that blood is not always bond, and that sometimes the ones you trust the most are the first to fall. But when they do, you do not weep, you hunt them. There is a moment that every warrior of the Emperor's spears remembers, not for what they did, but for what they could not. A moment etched into the marrow of their bones when the sky above Nemeton wept blood and the stars no longer followed the order of man. It came with no warning. No astropath screamed, no bolt gun could stop it. It was the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum. They had no name for it at first. It was not a phenomenon nor a declaration. It was an ending, sudden and complete. One day the stars burned steady, and the next they twisted like worms. The veil always existed on the edge of the Imperium's grasp, but now it fell beyond it. A great black wound tore across the galaxy's skin, a rift of pure warp that yawned wider than entire sectors. Terra's light disappeared. The Astronomicon, once a faint but faithful pulse, even across the veil's storms, simply died. The spears watched the sky turn red, and then came the silence. Every long-range Vox station, every astropathic conduit, every orbiting relay, gone. Ships departing for reinforcements never returned. Navigators stared into the void and saw only madness. The stars no longer made sense. Systems that were once a day's travel apart became unreachable. The tides of the warp, already treacherous in the veil, surged with chaotic fury. And no one came. No Ultramarines, no Primaris reinforcements, no reinforcements at all. The Imperium, as far as the spears were concerned, had simply ceased to exist. The first panic did not come from the warriors. It came from the mortal population, from the 12 tribes and the outpost worlds, from scattered Imperial colonies whose only protection had ever been the spear's watchful eye. Some burned their cities and offered blood to false gods, believing the end had come. Others begged the chapter for sanctuary, sending envoys in coracles through storm and ash. The spears accepted none of them, not out of cruelty, but because they could not. The spears were not made to govern. They had no fleets of transports, no armies of laborers. Their fortress monastery floated, as always, upon the ocean of Nemeton, a war shrine, not a refuge. They were swords, not shields, and now they stood alone. For a time, the chapter simply held position. Patrols tripled. The gilded blade activated every dormant servitor deck. Deep-sea forges were lit for continuous production. Every battle brother was recalled to the Vale. Even the eldest dreadnoughts, slumbering in isolation for centuries, were awoken one by one. The chapter master, Arukatas, already ancient, his face etched like volcanic stone, declared a new phase of existence. A name given in the old Ogham tongue, Ken Narthak. It meant the Knight of the Broken Road. From that day forward, the Spears would no longer expect help. They would no longer believe in reinforcements or Imperium-wide strategies or galactic crusades. They would act as the last warriors of humanity. Not because it was true, but because it was safe to believe so. They were to be the light in the abyss. They were to be the last memory of loyalty. And if the Imperium ever returned, they would not be found wanting. What followed were the hardest years in the chapter's memory. The war hosts, once rotating across deployment zones, were forced to remain in the Vale permanently. Every system had to be protected, every signal investigated. It was not warfare in the traditional sense. It was siege, an endless siege without walls. Nemeton itself changed. The storms, once brutal but predictable, began to behave unnaturally. Warp-churned lightning split the oceans with unnatural fury. Whispers drifted on the winds. Tribal shamans, long tolerated as harmless psychers, began to die, their heads bursting into flame mid-ritual. Those who survived claimed the sea gods were gone, replaced by something hollow, something watching. And in the depths of the oceans, shapes stirred. The chapter did not investigate these phenomena directly. They lacked the strength. Instead, they fortified. They layered their mobile bastions in adamantium. They laid minefields across warp lanes. They installed macro-lance batteries on orbital wrecks and constructed silent kill satellites with Mechanicus schematics, long forgotten, a shield of blood and steel. But no shield can last forever. 2 years after the rift opened, the Spears received a signal, weak, fragmented, bouncing between data caches hidden in Mechanicus probes. It bore the encryption keys of the Adeptus Astartes. Its origin, the Indevout Abjuration, a ship lost to the warp decades earlier. And on board was an outsider, not a survivor, not a refugee, but a messenger, Amadeus Caius Incarius, Lieutenant Commander of the Mentors chapter, a warrior of Gilliman's own blood who had crossed the void to find the Spears. His arrival shook the chapter, not because they doubted his intentions, but because he proved something terrible. The Imperium had not known. All their pleas, all their distress calls, all their beacon flares and encoded bursts sent over and over again into the warp had never arrived. The Spears had not been abandoned. They had been forgotten. The rage this revelation stirred was not loud. The Spears do not scream. They do not demand. But the war hosts grew colder. The librarians sealed the vault of names for 7 days. The sea priests of the 12 tribes sacrificed an entire archipelago's harvest in silence. And when Arukatas emerged, he did not speak. He simply placed a single new line into the Book of Endings, an ancient tome of Ogham prophecy. The line read, "The one who remembers must teach the one who forgot." Incarius, broken and half-dead from his journey, was taken not as a guest, but as a brother. He was not questioned. He was adopted. Slowly, his wounds healed. His weapons were reforged, his warplate re-etched in the Spear's blue and silver. He became Vadhan, his former name sealed away. He was the first outside blood accepted in over a millennium, and his words mattered. He spoke of the Indomitus Crusade, of Primaris, of Guilliman's return. The Spears listened, not with awe, but with caution. They remembered what had happened the last time they trusted other chapters. They remembered the Velari Pact. They remembered betrayal. Still, the truth could not be ignored. Terra lived. Guilliman walked, and the Imperium fought on. And the spears, they had not fallen. They had endured without guidance, without reinforcements, without faith in anything beyond their duty. When the sky was torn and the stars changed and the galaxy lost its light, they stayed. They held the line, not because they hoped it would be recognized, but because someone had to. And now, with the return of the Imperium, came a question they had not asked in a long time. What now? Was the veil still theirs alone? Was the debt of silence to be forgiven? Or would the Imperium once more look past them until the next storm came? The spears do not rush to answer. They watch the stars. They count the silence. And they wait, not for orders, but for signs. Because when the sky broke, they did not. And that, above all, is what defines them. When the Mentors chapter dispatched Amadeus Caius Incarius into the warp-split blackness of Ilara's Veil, they did not send him to survive. He was not meant to return. His mission was to confirm what Terra had already assumed, that the Emperor's spears were extinct, or worse, corrupted. It was a task wrapped in formality and death. A single ship, a fractured path, a martyr's errand with no laurels waiting. But what emerged from the storm was not a ghost. It was something sharper, something reforged. What returned was Vodan. Though the name belonged to the spears and not to the chapter into which he had been born, the transformation was not cosmetic. It was not a rebranding, nor even a gesture of fraternity. It was an act of transfiguration. The Incarius that had once quoted the Codex Astartes like sacred text was dead. Vadan, child of the storm, brother of the blade, had been carved from pain, sacrifice, and revelation, and his body bore the cost. When the indevout abjuration had first reached Nematon's orbit, its hull was scarred with psychic corrosion. Its shields pulsed out of rhythm. Warp rot had crept into its corridors, forming oily ichor where coolant once flowed. Inside, half the crew were dead, the others traumatized. And in the medici hold, beneath layers of auto-sutures, scar paste, and half-withered flesh, lay Incarius. He was unconscious. His face had been partially removed, replaced with surgical grafts of silver and bone-etched ceramite. His right arm was missing entirely, replaced by a mechanical limb fused not with standard Martian tech, but with something improvised. Burn marks marred his chest. His rib cage had been re-broken multiple times. He had not been healed. He had been rebuilt. The chapter apothecarian did not move quickly. The spears do not fear death. But in Vadan, they sensed something ancient, a survivor's spark that echoed their own. They could see it in the way his eyes opened, slowly, without flinch or panic. He did not gasp for air. He did not cry out. He simply stared upward and whispered a name none of them knew. Kizar. The name meant little then. It would come to mean more later. But at that moment, what mattered was the choice. The spears could have let him die. They could have given him the warrior's death he had earned, let him sink beneath Nematon's waves with honor, remembered as a stranger who crossed the storm. Instead, they chose something different. They gave him a second birth. They inducted him into the Primaris Ascension. It was no small decision. The technology, gifted through uncertain means from the Crusade fleets and Bellona's hidden forges, was still new, barely stable. The process of crossing a standard Astartes into Primaris form was fraught with failure. Some did not survive. Some changed too much. But Vadan did not flinch. He accepted the augmentation with the same silence he had carried into war. And when he emerged, he was taller, stronger, his frame clad in Mark X armor, daubed not in the white and green of his birth chapter, but the storm blue and salt silver of the spears. His helm was shaped like the old kind, tribal lines etched across the brow in Ogham. His pauldrons bore no purity seals, only a single line engraved into the chest plate: "Endure the silence." His first mission as a spear came quickly. A listening post on the edge of the Argish belt, a forgotten string of hollow moons, had gone dark. No astropaths survived on site, only low-frequency beacon pulses triggered during emergencies. Aboard the Hex, one of the chapter's few remaining strike cruisers, Vadan was assigned command of a 10-man kill team. The squad was mixed: 2 primaris, 7 veterans, 1 scout sergeant promoted directly from the tribal pools. He was not welcomed, not at first. The older spears did not trust him. He had not bled on Nematon's soil. He had not drifted the oceans. He had not faced the trial of drift, nor borne the spear guess. He was outside blood, but he carried himself like one of them. He spoke in silence. He understood their hand signs, their rhythms, their aversion to ceremony. He asked nothing, offered little, but stood the line as they did. The mission to Argish was uneventful on the surface. The beacon had been triggered by an internal systems fault, a collapsed reactor relay. No signs of heresy, no external damage. But when Vadan descended into the vault levels, he found a chamber, not listed in the base schematics, sealed from the inside. Inside were 13 bodies. Human, mostly, administratum personnel, a lone tech priest, 2 Astra Militarum advisors. They were not killed in violence. No blood, no sign of struggle. They had starved to death. Around them were data slates, burned, cogitator units, smashed, and on the walls, scratched with fingernails and broken teeth, a single message repeated over and over in crude low Gothic: "Do not remember him. Do not say his name. Khazar is thought. Thought is infection." Vadan did not speak of it to his squad. He burned the chamber. He filed no report. And when asked by Lord Brake of the War Council what he had found, he only answered, "There was silence." But others began to notice the change. He did not sleep. Not truly. Apothecaries found his gene seed functioning at higher than standard stability. His reaction times improved. His thoughts accelerated. But he also grew more still. Not solemn, motionless, like a statue waiting to be broken. He began to read, not the Codex Astartes, nor the chapter's own war scrolls, but the Ogham stones, the runes of the tribes, the chants of the Oracle of Kanta, preserved in fragments by the sea priests. He listened to Storm Song and asked the scribes to play back recordings of Nematon's tides in sequence. No one understood why, not even the librarians. But one day he came before the War Council and presented a theory. He did not call it a prophecy. He called it a pattern. 3 systems, all dark, all silenced, all bearing fragments of old Scorpion kill code, all within 3 warp weeks of Hyreth's grave. A ring, a spiral, a glyph, when drawn out, that mirrored the oldest of Ogham symbols, the one for echo. Vatin claimed it was a path, not a strategy, not a tactical retreat, but a signal, an invitation. Lord Arukatas heard the theory. He did not question the logic. He only asked a single thing. "Is it bait?" Vadan replied, "Yes." "Will it be a trap?" "Yes." "Then we will go." He was no longer doubted after that. The Hex was refitted, its lances relit. Vadan was named Turnri, not a rank, but a title from the tribes, meaning Seeker King. He was not placed above the captains, nor given command of a war host. But when the spears prepared to sail into darkness again, they followed his path. Not because of what he promised, but because of what he had become. Not a relic of a forgotten Imperium, but a son of silence, a warrior of the storm, a spear. The hunt began at Starfall, where dying suns ring a hollow void the Chartists call the Revel. No light there is honest. Every star burns the wrong color, as though watched through bruised eyelids. In that poison dusk, the Emperor's spears gathered 4 ships, the strike cruiser Hex, the battle bark Gilded Blade, and 2 weather-scarred frigates, Wound Tide and Gauth Mara. Aboard each deck, warriors moved like shadows, blades kissed with storm oil, armor etched in ogham that promised endurance rather than victory. Vadan, still new to his rebuilt form, yet older in purpose than many veterans, traced the pattern found on those silenced worlds, an echoing spiral etched in void coordinates, its arms curling sunward toward a single uncharted system listed only as K-Woth. Librarians whispered that the shape matched tribal runes for return, but Vadan offered no prophecy. "It is a path," he said, and that was enough. Lord Arukatas marshaled the 3rd and 5th war hosts, and the fleet slipped from Nemeton into Warpshire without a hymn or flare. They carried expectation like a chain around the throat. The warp greeted them badly. Within the first translation, screamstorms rattled the frigates, turning picked feeds into stuttering mosaics of blood-colored static. Machine spirits wailed in metallic tongues, servitors clutched at invisible knives. Yet the spears did not deviate. They moved through the madness guided by Vadan's cold certainty and the half-sung auguries of the Hex's navigator, whose third eye bled each time she set a new course marker. 3 jumps later, the Gilded Blade emerged in real space beneath a planet of cracked marble and iron spires, the first coil of the spiral. Sensors found no life signs. Still, the spears descended. They found Manufactoria streets littered with ossified human skins, empty like shed cocoons, each stamped on the brow with the scorpion's tail now twisted into the Pure's 7-point sigil. In the central plaza, a vox mast still flickered. On approach, it triggered, playing a single sound. A heartbeat, slowed to the cadence of funeral drums. When Brother Chirurgeon Muir tried to cut power, the mast exploded, showering the squad in powdered bone that tasted of salt, even through sealed helms. No enemy showed itself, only message. "We remember that you remember." Warhost Council convened aboard the Blade's Strategium. Vadan plotted the next point on the spiral. A binary dwarf pair, its inhabited moons gone dark for decades. Again the pattern repeated, colonists gone, structures untouched, grim tableau left behind to be found. On one moon, every pick screen displayed a single frame, frozen in endless loop. A scorpion captain saluting unidentified legionaries, while robed figures clapped in a mechanicum forum, an image clearly centuries old, yet the hololithic quality was impossibly perfect. It was a memory given teeth. Disquiet grew among the spears. Firstborn veterans muttered that the Pure were not merely killing, they were teaching, forcing the chapter to follow breadcrumbs of terror. Primaris brothers, newer to the Veil's peculiar malignancy, felt a colder dread, that the Pure's logic resembled strategy, as though some calculating intellect measured every emotional wound as keenly as causalities. Arukatas allowed debate to flare, but at its height he silenced the hall with 3 dull strikes of his Stormblade on the dais. "Fear the lesson only if you refuse to learn," he intoned. "We are spears. We answer taunts with steel." The 3rd coil lay inside a nebular rift where electromagnetic storms cripple long-range Vox. Closing on the coordinates, the fleet found a drifting orbital station, designation Themis Node, long lost to Administratum archives. Unlike previous sites, this one pulsed with life. Thermal scans revealed hundreds of beating hearts in stasis racks, each suspended in amniotic nutrient gel. The ship's auspex identified gene markers matching the celestial lions, the scorpions, and the Emperor's spears themselves. Recovered data plaques showed abduction records spanning 3 centuries, updated days before the fleet arrived. Recovery became rescue-turned-battle. As apothecaries raced to thaw prisoners, the node's cogitators awoke and vented atmosphere through segmented bays. Servitor custodians, limbs replaced by neurosynaptic flensors, attacked without war cry. They moved in total silence, striking at joints and power cables rather than hearts. For every one destroyed, another emerged from crawl ducts. In the central cortex chamber, Vadan discovered a datasphere pulsing with living code. Scraps of scorpion kill logic enveloping something older, harsher, yet recognizable. Mentor command routines, mutated like white bone painted blood red. Realizations stabbed. The pure were not only ex-scorpions. They had ingested other gene lines, maybe even machines, hybridizing culture into doctrine, removing identity to perfect obedience. The node blew apart under controlled charges. Survivors, only 63, were evacuated. Most were half catatonic, their tongues carved out, ears replaced by cyber receptors. As Medici worked, some regained enough will to carve words in bloodied gauze. He hears through us. The spiral's last curl pointed to a black body star where mathematics says no planet could orbit. Yet Auspex returned a mass signature, an artificial sphere 12,000 kilometers across, floating less than 2 million kilometers from the stellar core, shielded by void shunts of design beyond Mechanicus orthodoxy. The spears named it Crucible Khazar before they even saw its hull. Holoscans revealed a vast alabaster shell inscribed with unbroken glyph lines connecting nodes like synapses. The Pure's fleet ringed it. 9 warships cannibalized from pre-heresy patterns, their colors scrubbed to bone white. To assault such a fortress with 4 vessels was suicide. To retreat would be to accept future incursions unchecked. So Arukatas chose the third path: break the pattern. While the frigates harried orbital sentry pickets, the Hex shut down reactor heat signature and drifted on minimal power, masked by stellar radiation. A single cohort of 40 spears in boarding torpedoes pierced a maintenance spur on the sphere's dark side. Among them strode Vadan, helm stripped of identifiers save the silent mark of the Gies that was never his. Inside Crucible Khazar, geometry betrayed sanity. Corridors sloped in Mobius twists, gravity shifted with mechanical heartbeat. Walls of pale ceramic steel breathed like lungs, exhaling cold data mist that flickered with half-heard prayers. The spears advanced room by room, planting melta-charges at power nodules, disabling defense grids. They expected ambush and found none until they reached the core. The chamber was cathedral vast, lit by columns of lattice fire. At its center hovered a sphere of liquid glass containing a man. No armor, skin white as dawn frost, face smooth, features erased, a blank mask grown from flesh. Cables penetrated his spine, fingers, skull. Around him, rank upon rank of pure stood in absolute stillness, bolters lowered, not guarding, but listening. Vadan stepped forward, unholstered his bolt pistol, and spoke a single word: Khazar. A ripple shivered through the army, helm lenses flaring red. The blank figure opened eyes like obsidian mirrors and smiled, though no mouth moved. In every spear's vox, a voice manifested, not through comms, but inside skulls, bypassing implants. I was you before you knew yourself. I removed the noise, joined silence. Refusal came not as rhetoric, but as wrath. The spears opened fire in the same instant. Khazar stretched out an arm, and every pure bolter discharged simultaneously, white tracers against storm blue armor. Close quarters carnage ignited. Vadan cut toward the glass sphere, carving through blank masks. Each foe fell without scream, their blood steaming translucently. Reaching the core, Vadan plunged his combat blade into a cable feeding Khazar's heart. Warp-cold backlash flared, hurling him across the dais. Arukatas, following with the second wave, slammed his thunder spear into the Crucible's support strut. Structural alarms wailed for the first time. Crucible Kezar felt pain. Kezar's image flickered, features rippling with fragments of faces, Scorpion captains, Bellona tech priests, even Incarius's younger countenance, before blanking again. Witness what purity costs. Through half-shattered viewports, the spears saw the artificial sphere's skin peel as reactor rings overloaded, torn by melta-charges planted hours earlier via remote servo-mites. Stellar plasma flooded containment. The assault team signaled extraction. Few reached it. The Hex retrieved 17. The Gilded Blade's lances vaporized debris as Crucible Kezar ruptured, spilling burning fragments into the black body star below. The pure fleet broke, half plunging into the star, the rest translating directly into warp, trails of corrupted afterimages vanishing like ghosts that refuse the dawn. In the aftermath, Medicae tallied losses. Lord Arukatas survived, arm shattered, helm severed, but Vadan was gone, presumed consumed in the final detonation. Yet, in the silence of the Gilded Blade's strategium, a lone Auspex rune blinked, an encrypted signal trailing faintly from the dying star. No data, just carrier code, Incarius Mentor. The war hosts made no pronouncement. They placed no new spear on the memory wall, until certainty they would call him lost, not dead. And in whispered councils they debated what Kezar's words implied, that the pure were not ended, merely wounded, and that silence itself might yet be weaponized against the chapter. But for one heartbeat of hard-won reprieve, the spiral was broken. The enemy's echo cut short, and in that pause as the fleet set course home through a galaxy still screaming, the Emperor's spears understood anew the price of vigilance. To hunt a shadow, you must step deeper into night than the shadow ever dared, and still come back holding light. There are names within the halls of the Gilded Blade that are never spoken aloud, spears whose fate is unrecorded, whose deeds are remembered only in silence. These are not the dead. There are rites for the dead, not the fallen. There is honor even in falling. These are the ones who simply vanished. A full war host, 312 Astartes. The 8th. The chapter calls them Tuar Sienaic. In tribal dialect, it means the storm that would not return. Their disappearance is not marked by grand tragedy. No demon host was unleashed. No warp ritual consumed them. No desperate message made it through the void to warn of treachery or doom. They left as all war hosts did, silent, confident, steel-bound, and never came back. Their last known deployment was to the Arduat Rim, a far-flung cluster of mining moons beyond the Veil's mapped perimeter. Reports from the forges of Bellona had tracked a pattern of irregular plasma spikes and mineral distortion in the void stone seams, phenomena often associated with warp bleed-through or subterranean demonic seepage. No Imperial colony had been established there. The only life registered were scrap scavenging tribes and outlaw Mechanicus defectors. Nothing worth a full war host, and yet the 8th deployed. Led by war host Lord Phelan of the Pale Eyes, an old warrior with skin like weathered ash and eyes the color of glacier ice. His warriors were known for their silence even among the spears. Phelan himself had once been thought mute for an entire century, choosing to speak only in Ogham etched onto his vambrace and pauldron. He was a master of the silent kill. His war host specialized in void combat, zero-G maneuver warfare, and deep gravity incursions. They were sent to solve problems quietly and permanently. They answered the call from Bellona. Their message was simple. We go. We endure. We end. And then, nothing. No second transmission, no distress beacon, no residual warp flare. Even the Mechanicus probes that shadowed the outer reaches of the Veil failed to pick up so much as ionized hull traces. The 8th was gone. The chapter waited. 3 weeks became 3 months. Scout vessels were dispatched, modified corvettes with silent running engines and hololithic masking fields. They swept the Arduat rim and returned with nothing but data: heat-scoured asteroids, hollowed moons, and the ruins of forged shrines that had been slagged down to their roots. One contained remnants of Mars-pattern robotics repurposed into sculpture, each servitor shaped into a kneeling position, arms uplifted toward the blackness above. On one of the moons, a crude altar had been erected. Not demonic, not blasphemous, just strange. It bore a spear broken in half and rebound with strips of human flesh, still tattooed with chapter iconography. Beneath it was carved a single phrase in ancient Ogum: "We followed too far." The chaplains refused to comment. The librarians ordered the altar preserved, sealed in null field stasis aboard the Gilded Blade. Some of the younger Primaris, new to the chapter, asked if the 8th had turned traitor. The question was not answered. Instead, Arukatas issued a rare edict. The 8th War Host's designation would not be retired. Their icon would remain upon the Strategium wall, but no recruits would be assigned to the number. No replacements made. The 8th was not dead. Not yet. They were simply absent, and absence in the Veil carries weight. There are many rumors. Some claim Phelan and his host followed a ghost signal into the black, that the Pure had seeded the Arduat rim with psychic illusions, drawing the War Host into a mirror dimension crafted from their own memories. Others say the 8th encountered something deeper than chaos, a pre-imperial intelligence awakening beneath the mineral crust of those dead moons. One scribe hypothesized that the War Host fell victim to the ancient Terran sin of recursion, that they found echoes of themselves so pure, so exact, they believed they had arrived home. The most whispered theory, however, is one the Spears do not discuss with outsiders. They believe the 8th were not destroyed, they were transformed, not corrupted, not slain, but changed into something else entirely, so much so that they could no longer return, that their silence is not absence but refusal, that they now walk worlds the chapter cannot follow, carrying out some greater task laid before them by the Veil itself. Some say Phelan became the oracle of Kanta's sword, an unseen executioner removing threats before they rise. Some say the 8th now drift aboard a colossal derelict ship, half chapter, half shrine, serving as sentinels for some secret too large for Nemeton to bear. And then there is the dream. Not a myth, not a vision, a dream shared. 6 years after the 8th vanished, 6 different battle brothers, spread across the 3rd, 5th, and 10th War Hosts, entered their meditative trances as normal. They were stationed on 3 different worlds, 3 different planets. On the same night they woke screaming. Each had dreamed the same dream. A war host, fully armored, standing in the ocean of Nemeton, not on a vessel, not on an island, but upon the storm itself. The sky was black, the lightning struck constantly, but made no sound. The waves were frozen mid-crash. And the warriors, tall, gleaming, motionless, stood with spears reversed, planted downward, points submerged into the sea. Their faces were blank, their voices silent, and yet a message pulsed between them, a phrase not spoken but known. We are not gone. We are waiting. The librarians took this seriously. The dream was recorded, encoded, and preserved. It was deemed not demonic in origin, nor a product of shared psychic bleed. It was classified as Veil Echo, an old term for the strange harmonics that pass through the region when enough silence gathers in one place. Following this, the chapter began to see signs, battlefields where footprints were found that did not match known units. remains of enemy weapons broken in ways familiar only to Phelan's techniques. Bolter casings of a design used only by the 8th, found embedded in xenos skulls long before the spears arrived. No official confirmation, no contact, just traces. Ghosts. There are those within the chapter, mostly among the librarius and apothecarian, who have begun to believe in a new principle, that the spears, once declared extinct, do not die in the normal sense. They fade. Their identities erode, their silence deepens, and they move beyond the structures of company and command. They become part of the Veil itself, part of the Watch. Whether Phelan and the 8th have taken that final step, or whether they still war in secret, none can say. But among the 12 tribes, where oral tradition matters more than written decree, stories are spreading. Children dream of blue-armored giants walking beneath the sea, their blades dragging across the ocean floor like plows. Fishermen speak of spears found embedded in the skulls of behemoths that had never been seen before. An old druidess near the South Reefs claims her blood rites showed her a man with glacier eyes carving fate into the wind. There is no proof, there is no answer. But in the Vault of Echoes aboard the Gilded Blade, a new Ogum stone has been placed, carved by Arukatas himself, in silence, with blade and salt paste. It says, "The 8th war host answers a different call, and for the spears, that is enough, because they do not seek to know everything, they only seek to endure. And to endure, you must accept that some answers are not given with words, but with absence. And sometimes silence is not loss, it is transformation." They called it the reddening. Not because of blood spilled, though there would be plenty, not because of sunlit banners drenched in martyrdom, though none would be raised, but because of what happened to the sky. The veil had always shimmered crimson, Ilara's veil, named for the thick haze of gas and residual warp radiation that gave the stars their stained glass gleam. But this was something else. The stars wept light as though bleeding from unseen wounds. Suns flared in pulses. Warp tides drew closer to real space. On 1,000 worlds across the veil, people woke from sleep gasping, swearing they had dreamed of red oceans where the sky had no end. The spears felt it before the first signal came. They always did. It began on the outer ring, System Theta, an agri-world of no consequence to most. Low-yield grain, shallow oceans, no major industry. The kind of planet that survives by being too small to notice. But the spears had eyes everywhere, and when Theta Phi went dark, their response was immediate. The 3rd war host deployed aboard the Wound Tide, supported by 6 fast attack cutters and a single modified gun crawler transported via suborbital drop. No fanfare, no vox pulse to Segmentum Command, no request for reinforcements. The chapter had long since abandoned hope of outside aid. What came instead were 48 warriors clad in cobalt and ash, weapons primed, drop rigs blessed by the salt priests of Nemeton. They expected resistance, a minor heretical uprising perhaps, a psyker gone rogue. What they found was a world already drowned in silence. Fields had not been harvested, livestock roamed unpenned, hab domes stood open with food still cooking and lights still burning. But there were no people, not in the houses, not in the forests, not even in the bunkers. The population, 40,000 souls, had vanished. The spears searched the planet for 6 days. On the 7th, they found the crater. At its center stood a tower built from the bones of 1,000 animals shaped in the form of a massive inverted spear. And around it, painted on the rock in a spiral that stretched for miles, were the words, "You will redden the earth, or it will redden you." The message was not a threat, it was a dare. The chapter understood. For centuries they had endured, held their watch, kept the veil from falling entirely into the teeth of warp-born madness. But enduring was not enough. The pure had returned in force. The arduate rim had grown darker, the oracle of Kanta had fallen silent, and the people of the Vale had begun to forget. Not forget the spears, forget why the spears existed at all. They saw only silence, only the faceless killers who never spoke. They whispered of curses, of omens. They called them ghosts in blue. That, more than any horror in the warp, was the true rot. So the chapter made a decision. A rare war council was called aboard the Gilded Blade. All surviving captains, librarians, and chapter command met in the Spear Hall, beneath the great vaulted Argam runes carved into the rib cages of Leviathans, drowned long before Nemeton was tamed. Lord Arukatas, now so ancient that parts of his flesh had been replaced with raw bronze and war steel, stepped onto the Blackstone dais and said one phrase: "We will no longer endure." There was no vote. There never had been. The chapter did not function by debate. When the old king spoke, the storm followed. The new doctrine was etched into the Argam Codex by the chapter's highest rune speaker, Caer Fiel. The reddening. Its laws were simple: no quarter, no delay, no more waiting for the enemy to arrive. The spears would carry war to every corner of the Vale where shadows gathered. They would leave nothing behind. The first target was Sigma Kairos, a gas giant with a network of orbital refineries once loyal to Bellona, now commandeered by a rogue Magos biologist named Dirax Os. The Mechanicus had quietly abandoned the facility after Dirax began experimenting on human flesh with xenos gene weaves. No formal censure had come, no inquisitorial purges. Just silence, bureaucracy in its most monstrous form. The spears ended it in one night. They cut through orbital defenses with prow-mounted macro lances. Boarding pods speared the refinery cores. 30 Primaris warriors in marked Dex plate descended like lightning, weapons linked by encoded data chains that turned them into a single engine of destruction. They found the Magos in a vault of glass, surrounded by vat-grown hybrid horrors, none of which lived long enough to scream. When it was over, they destroyed the orbital structure from the inside, overloading the plasma furnaces until they collapsed into themselves. As the fire spread, they did not extract. They waited until the last tank ruptured, until the last scream died in the static. Then they sent the message. No words, just coordinates sent to Bellona and 3 loyalist chapters in the region. Coordinates and a single image, a red spear driven into a burning world. The next target was Naxos Prime, a minor Forge world fragment turned autonomous by a tech secessionist cult. The spears did not even deploy ground troops. They flooded the atmosphere with incendiary gas, then shattered the orbital plates. Naxos burned in orbit. Its last transmission was an emergency communique begging for negotiation. The spears never responded. Across the Vale, fear turned. Before, they had been watchers. Now they were the Red Wind, the storm that moved. Some began to claim they had gone rogue. The Celestial Lions, reduced in number and influence, sent envoys to negotiate coordination. The envoys were received in perfect silence, housed aboard the Wound Tide for 6 days. When they departed, they said nothing, but their faces were pale, and they made no mention of the spears again. Others claimed the spears had adopted a policy of genocide, that they were burning the Vale indiscriminately, that the reddening had no honor. But those who truly understood the chapter knew the truth. They were not killing for vengeance. They were teaching. Every war, every spear plunged into heresy, every pyre lit beneath the stars. They were reminders, warnings carved into history with fire and blade. The Imperium had forgotten the Vale before. They would not forget it again. But the reddening was not only fire and fury, it was reclamation. On the world of Calix Marn, a once loyal bastion fractured by warp incursions, the Spears deployed a triad of war hosts to rebuild. They brought apothecaries to heal the sick, tech adepts from Bellona to repair the city's sacred engines. For 7 months, they fought tooth and nail to purge the taint from the world, not with extermination, but with surgical ruthlessness. The message was clear: be loyal, be true, be worthy, and we will bleed with you. Only those who invited the dark would know the full storm. The reddening continues to this day. It is not a campaign. It is not a crusade. It is not a line in a codex. It is a philosophy, a reminder that the Emperor's spears are not watchers waiting to die. They are swords in motion. They are storm given form. They are vengeance given voice. And now the veil bleeds red, not from wounds, but from memory. They call them savages. They whisper it in high Gothic halls, where robed magisters sip oil-slick wine and debate theology over the corpses of dead stars. In the cloisters of Terra's basilicae, where golden light drowns reality and silence means obedience, the name of the Emperor's spears is often followed by the same refrain: savages, feral, deviant. They say it because the spears wear war paint made from ash and salt, because their rites are sung in guttural ogham, not in sanctioned scripture, because they take their recruits, not from Schola Progenium halls or ultramarine bastions, but from half-drowned tribes who read fate in the way blood spreads across stone. But the Emperor did not want parades. He did not want statues. He did not want worlds of glass and marble. He wanted warriors. And on Nemeton he found them. The sons of the Emperor's spears are not made in the mold of other chapters. They do not mirror the stoic pragmatism of the Imperial fists, nor the calculated perfection of the Ultramarines. They are not howling berserkers or cloaked mystics. They are something older, something simpler, something truer. They are endurance, given form. From the moment of selection, marked by the sacred geas carved in blood, they are not molded into warriors. They are warriors. The moment they take their first breath in the storm-slicked air of Nemeton, they begin their march toward the blade. Each aspirant, drawn from the 12 tribes, has survived things the scholars of Terra would call impossible. They have hunted reef stalkers with bone knives, fought duels over salt rites, endured nights where the ocean burned with green fire and shadows walked the shore. The trial of drift, their great rite, is not a test of combat. It is a conversation with death. Alone, with nothing but a spear and fate, the boy aspirant drifts across the endless sea until he is either chosen or forgotten. Some are claimed by the ocean, others by the things beneath it. The ones who return do so not with triumph, but with silence. They have seen what waits in the dark. They no longer fear it. They carry that into the reforging, not merely the implantation of gene seed organs. That is standard. But the reforging, the spiritual integration of the boy into the chapter's myth, it begins with the scarring when the bone runes of the aspirant's geas are cut into his chest with a shard of ancestral stone taken from the foundations of the gilded blade. A chaplain chants a litany known only to the spears, not recorded in the Lexicon Astartes, nor acknowledged by the ecclesiarchy. Then the silence. Each initiate is placed in isolation aboard a drifting satellite. 1 week, no food, no light, only the sound of Nemeton's tides played through the walls. Many break. Those who remain sane return changed. Their eyes lose something, youth maybe, humanity. In return, they gain the quiet. It is not submission, it is focus. From that point forward, the chapter begins its deeper work. They do not just train in blade and bolt gun. They are taught the Ogham lines carved into ancient reef rocks by warriors long dead. They are taught how to track a heretic by the way his boots touch soil. They are taught how to pray, not to the Emperor as God, but to the memory of the Emperor, to the idea that he watches, not to save, but to see if they are worthy of being saved. That is the deepest truth of the spears. They do not fight for reward. They fight to prove that someone still can. Their brotherhood is unlike any other chapter. The Astartes are warriors, yes, but among the spears they are also council. Every war host, every squad functions as an autonomous blood knot, built not only around command hierarchy, but trust forged in fire. They do not punish failure with shame. They punish dishonesty. To fail in battle is not sin. To lie about why you failed is. They do not suffer ego. They do not record victory songs. They keep no monument to themselves. Their halls are lined with the names of the lost, not the triumphant. They do not remember glory. They remember cost. Every spear is marked, not with honors, but with stories. Every battle brother carries one physical token from the battlefield that changed him most. A melted bolter casing, a fragment of enemy armor, the scorched tooth of a slain brother. These items are never shown. They are carried in armor niches near the secondary hearts, where only the bearer can feel them press against the flesh. This is not sentiment. This is remembrance. Among the spears, even the chaplains are different. They are called the Echoed, not because they preach, but because they speak only what has already been said. Their litanies are not written. They are inherited, tales passed from warrior to warrior, father to son, by blood and bone. They wear skull helms carved not from human bone, but from the reef whales that patrol the deep trench beyond Nemeton's southern shelf. Their Crozius Arcanum is shaped like a storm spear, etched with the names of every war host member who has died under their watch. They are not leaders, they are reminders. The Primaris, since their arrival, have struggled to integrate into this culture, not because they lack skill, but because they were born from vaults, not oceans. They did not dream beneath the waves. They did not take the trial of drift. Their geas is not carved into their skin. But over time, things have changed. The Primaris learned to carve Ogham. They learned to remain silent when rage would serve better. They learned that brotherhood among the spears is not earned through victory, but through endurance. Some among them have now taken the trial, despite their enhanced physiology. They have swum into the depths, cast themselves into the storm, and returned with nothing but scars and saltwater lungs. They are called Stormborn, a rare honor. Even among firstborn veterans, they are respected, because among the spears, shared pain matters more than shared genome. The Emperor's spears are not ultramarines in storm-painted armor. They are not echoes of Gilliman. They are their own. Their savagery is not madness, it is discipline. Their silence is not emptiness, it is meaning. They are the blade held too long in a clenched fist, forgotten, unpolished, buried in rust and blood, but still sharp, still waiting, still capable of cutting the throat of the dark. They are not perfect, they are not pure, they are not imperial in the way Terra prefers, but they are true. And in the Veil, truth is the only thing that still bleeds when the world no longer remembers your name. Deep in the southern hemisphere of Nemeton lies the shrouded peninsula, where storm fogs never lift, and the wind carries voices that do not belong to the living. No cities stand there, no outposts, no signal towers or satellite arrays. It is a place abandoned by logic, denied by cartography, avoided even by the chapter's most hardened scouts. Yet for centuries, warriors of the Emperor's spears have made the pilgrimage, not because they were ordered, but because the Oracle of Kanta called to them. No records speak of her origin. not in the archives of Terra, not in the vaults of Bologna, and certainly not among the files sent by the Adeptus Mechanicus during the founding of the Adeptus Astartes. To the Imperium, she does not exist. To the Spears, she is the one voice they trust without hesitation. Some say she is older than the chapter itself, a living relic of the first human tribes who reached Nemeton and learned to sing beneath the sea. Others whisper that she is not a woman at all, but a construct, part biomantic interface, part psi-echo, fused to the planet's spiritual lattice through an accident of warp and grief. A few believe she is the last surviving vestige of an ancient Librarius experiment that was never sanctioned, still dreaming in fog and blood. None of these things matter. What matters is this: when a warrior is lost, truly lost, not to defeat or pain, but to doubt, he walks the path to Kanta, and if he returns changed. The path is not marked. Those who seek the Oracle are given nothing. No coordinates, no escort, only a piece of woven cord, hand-dyed in storm blue and gray, wrapped around their wrist by a silent chaplain of the Echoed. Then they are dismissed. They go alone. No weapons, no armor, no comms. They walk through brine swamps where the ground breathes, through whispering dunes of dust glass that scream when stepped on, across cliffs where ancient spears stand impaled in stone, always pointing toward the same impossible horizon. Some do not return. Those who do never speak of what they saw, not aloud, only in hand sign and only to the Echoed. But the signs always carry the same weight. She waits. She saw. She remembered. Vadan once walked that path, before he bore that name, before he became the Turnri. When he was still Incarius, still mentor-born, still bound by the doctrines of Terra and its cold logic. It was not a mission. It was desperation. He had stood upon the deck of the Hex, blood still fresh in the cracks of his armor after a war host lost to madness on Tua Araxis. He had watched his brothers drowned in ash, their minds shattered by scorpion code that had no logic, only hunger. He had filed the reports. Tactically correct, emotionally void. Then one night he left. He said nothing. The librarians let him go. Some say it was Lord Arukatas himself who gave the order that Vadhan must pass the only trial that could not be quantified, Kanta's silence. He returned a week later, drenched in salt and bruises, his eyes shadowed but clear. He never told the council what happened. But from that moment forward, he spoke in Ogham as fluently as any tribal-blooded brother. He bore his silence not as burden, but as banner. And within 3 months, the war host followed him without question. The Oracle does not offer commands. She does not prophesy like the psychers of the Scholastica Sicana, nor does she scribble mad glyphs on parchment while her eyes bleed flame. She asks questions. Questions no one else dares to ask. Will you still hold the line when the line is gone? What is left when the Emperor does not speak? Is silence the end or the beginning? These questions are not rhetorical. They unmake the warrior. Strip away the armor, the gene seed, the pride, the creed. What survives walks back from Kanta with a new Gias burned into his soul. The old Gias is carved on flesh, the new one etched on the inside where no eye can see. It binds not with pain but with meaning. The Oracle does not live alone. Around her, strange beings walk the fog, warriors in ancient armor, their sigils unrecognizable. Some say they are the lost of the 8th war host, having walked too far into Kanta's storm and chosen never to return. Others claim they are memories given form, echoes of choices never made. A few among the librarians believe they are the future, potential fates walking backward, bleeding into now. They are called the Silent Watch. And when a great change nears, when a spear stands on the edge of something too large for the chapter to comprehend, one of the Silent Watch will appear, not to interfere, only to observe. When the reddening began, 3 were seen standing on the cliffs of the southern reef. When the gilded blade vanished for 17 days in the warp and returned untouched, a silent watcher stood on its bridge for exactly 3 heartbeats before fading. They do not speak, they only watch, and their presence means the Veil is listening. Not all make it to the Oracle. Some are turned back by fear. Others are tested in ways that leave them broken, shivering beneath the fog, unable to remember their name, or worse, remembering too many names. The Apothecarian keeps a wing aboard the wound hide reserved for these warriors. They call it the Hall of Echoes, not for healing, but for listening. Because sometimes these broken brothers say things they should not know, coordinates to worlds not yet charted, secrets only known to the pure, phrases spoken in pre-imperial dialects, and sometimes in the quiet hours of Nematon's longest night, the Oracle herself is heard in their dreams, asking a final question. When the last spear breaks, who will hold the memory? In the end, the Oracle is not a tool, not a weapon, not a miracle. She is a mirror, held up to the soul of a chapter born not from hope, but from refusal. Refusal to die, refusal to forget, refusal to break. She reminds them that the Emperor's spears are not just warriors, they are witnesses. And sometimes being a witness is the hardest thing of all. To watch the galaxy burn, to hold the line when the tide turns red, to endure, not because you will win, but because you must be there when everyone else is gone. That is what she offers. Not peace, not answers, just a place where the questions no one wants to ask can be spoken aloud. And in that, there is clarity. The spears do not need prophecy, they need remembrance. And the Oracle of Kanta remembers everything. In the void beyond the veil, there is a silence unlike any other. It is not the silence of prayer or death, or the frozen vacuum between stars. It is deeper, older. A silence carved not by absence, but by decision. A silence made sharp enough to cut. It is into that silence the Emperor's spears now march. The chapter stands at the edge, not just of a war, not of extinction, but of purpose. For 10,000 years they have endured. They have stood sentinel over a realm, abandoned, cursed, and forgotten. They have never asked for thanks, never demanded recognition. They have bled into nameless soil, buried brothers in oceans that had no shore, held back terrors with blades dulled from 1,000 campaigns, and they did it with no hope of reinforcement, no dreams of glory, only silence. But silence does not endure forever. Something has changed, not just in the stars or the warp or the dance of loyalist and traitor. Number something within. The Emperor's spears are waking to a truth that they had long suspected, long whispered, long feared, that the Emperor may never speak again, that his silence is not pause but absence. And if he is truly gone, then the veil does not simply fall into madness. It falls into meaninglessness, and that is the one thing the spears cannot abide. They were made for purpose, for watchfulness. To endure was to serve. But what do you do when endurance itself becomes a cage? You break it. And so they forge the last spear. It is not a weapon in the traditional sense, not a relic passed down, not a war blade sanctified in holy oils. It is an idea, born in the mind of Lord Arukatus, shaped by the visions of the librarians, and hammered into definition by the hands of warriors who have lost too much. The last spear is a doctrine, a plan, a promise, that if the chapter is to end, it will not end quietly. It will not fade into the fog of history like the 8th War Host or the Lost Sons of the Reddening. It will be remembered, and more than that, it will make the galaxy remember itself. The War Council that forged the last spear took place aboard the Hex in orbit over the planet Gadron, a world swallowed by warp tides and long since abandoned by the Imperium. The chapter had no reason to return, no strategic value, no vital resource, just ruins. And yet they came. Every war host sent delegates, even the Silent Watch attended, standing unspoken at the periphery. The Oracle of Kanta did not appear, but a shard of black coral, soaked in blood, was placed on the center of the table without explanation. It pulsed, and the chapter listened. Arukata spoke first. His voice was low, made gravel by age and injury. He spoke of ghosts, of duty, of finality. "We are not dying," he said. "We are arriving." One by one, the others stood, veterans of wars that history refused to record, Primaris who had left behind the sterile honor of their design to embrace the storm, scout captains whose bodies bore more scars than armor. They stood and, in turn, each swore an oath. Not to Terra, not to the Codex, to memory, to the idea that someone must remember what it meant to be human, even if the humans themselves forgot. From these oaths, the last spear took shape. Not a plan of conquest, but a plan of witness. The spears would go where the Imperium refused, into broken systems, into lost sectors, into the haunted worlds where traitor and demon made their dens and cried themselves kings. Not to reclaim, not to garrison, but to remind, to be a blade in the dark that says, "You are not forgotten." To be the storm that screams, "There are still consequences." To be the last voice in a galaxy of silence. And if they die in that effort, then they die loud. The first strike was in the Vorin Expanse, a cluster of forge worlds that had declared independence under the banner of the Omnicreed Ascendant, a radical sect of tech heresy that believed in unbinding the machine god from Mars and elevating data itself to divinity. They had repelled 2 Imperial attempts to reconquer them, used psychic interfaces, AI constructs, and Hirtech war forms stolen from pre-heresy vaults. The Spears did not send a fleet. They sent 4 warriors, just 4. 1 from each war host, no warning, no message. They landed in the heart of the capital spire, cut through 3,000 meters of steel and adamantium, and detonated the central data core using an ancient virus weapon preserved since the Great Scouring. The entire network died. The sect was decapitated. As the planet burned, a single message was broadcast across the void in base code tones. "We remember." Next came the Shifting Belt, an asteroid cluster believed to be haunted, host to an ancient xeno cult that had devoured an inquisitorial warband whole. The Spears deployed silently. They did not exterminate. They did not cleanse. They hunted. Over 13 days, they killed every member of the cult, one by one. Each body was left in ritual pose, arms spread in the Augum shape of the spear. Each mouth was sewn shut, and when the last cultist died, the Spears left no beacon, no marker, only the silence, and the galaxy felt it. More followed. The burning of Yaitro Station, the dismemberment of the Crimson Pact on Kaidobal, the death of the Void Psychers on Melanthus the Ninth. Each act carved like a line in the great eulogy the chapter was writing, not for themselves, but for everyone. They are fewer now. Every strike costs lives they cannot replace. But there is no fear. The last spear was never meant to preserve the chapter. It was meant to mean something, and that it does. Across the Imperium, whispers spread of storm-painted angels who arrive in silence, strike without mercy, and leave no trace but salt-stained blood and a single mark, a spear broken, then reforged. Some say they are ghosts, some say they are myths, some say they are the Emperor's judgment returned in final form. They are none of those things. They are the Emperor's spears. And this is what they were always meant to be. Not guardians, not saints, witnesses. The last memory of a galaxy that once knew honor. The last blade of an oath sworn in salt, not stone. The last spear. And when that spear breaks, let it be known across the stars, it broke because it struck, not because it was left to rust.